Where are the real guards?" The words came out as a dry chuckle from Otto Kruger, his voice cracking in the Texas heat. Around him, 50 other captured German soldiers halted in a wave of confusion and amusement. Their boots sank into the dust of the road that led into the camp, if you could even call it that. Beyond the barbed wire and guard towers, there were no uniforms of authority, no polished boots, no snapping salutes. Only a handful of men in denim shirts, rolled sleeves, and wide-brimmed hats leaned lazily against a wooden fence, rifles resting on their shoulders like farm tools. The air shimmered. It was late August 1944, the sun burning low and mean over the plains, and a hot wind rolled in carrying the smell of hay and cattle. The prisoners, still stiff in their Wehrmacht greys, felt the grit in their teeth. One of them muttered, "The Amerikanisch Cowboys." The rest laughed, low and bitter, as though the word itself were an insult. Otto spat into the dirt. "They send ranchers to guard soldiers?" He spoke it loud enough for the nearest Texan to hear. The guard, tall, broad, face shadowed by the brim of his hat, just smiled, chewing slowly on a strand of wheat. He didn't bother answering. That infuriated Otto more than an insult would have. A whistle blew. The column moved again. Dust rose around them, catching sunlight like smoke. Inside the camp, rows of wooden barracks stretched neatly, everything smelling of pine and sun-baked tar. No shouting officers, no barking dogs. Just the creak of a windmill, the drone of cicadas, and that infuriating calm. The prisoners were lined up near the main gate. A man in khaki stepped forward, Lieutenant Henry Walker, the camp's commander. He looked nothing like an officer Otto recognized. No medals, no stiffness, only a quiet posture and eyes that missed nothing. "Welcome to Texas, gentlemen," he said in a steady voice. "You play by the rules, you'll eat well, sleep well, and go home when it's time." Someone behind Otto snorted. Another whispered, "They sound more like pastors than soldiers." Otto grinned. He couldn't help it. "If this is America's army," he said, "we should have won the war already." The men around him laughed again, a sharp, weary sound that bounced off the barracks and faded into the endless field. Walker said nothing, only nodded to his men to begin assigning quarters. The guards moved without hurry, but with an ease that suggested control, like cowhands guiding cattle without needing the whip. Otto noticed it but brushed it off. These were farm boys, not fighters. By dusk, the camp settled into a rhythm. A bell rang for supper. The smell of beans and cornbread drifted through the fences. The Germans lined up with suspicion, but hunger won. Inside the mess hall, long wooden tables and tin trays waited. A cowboy guard leaned on the doorway, greeting each man with a slow nod. Otto ignored him. The food was strange, sweet bread, coffee black as engine oil, meat soft enough to cut with a spoon. "Prison food for kings," one of the Germans joked. Another replied, "Maybe they're fattening us up." Laughter again, and the guard smiled faintly but didn't respond. That silence began to unsettle Otto. In Germany, guards barked orders. Here, they just watched, calm and unbothered. It felt wrong, like the quiet before a storm. After supper, when the sky turned violet and the wind cooled, Otto wandered near the wire fence. Beyond it, a group of Texans were gathered around a pile of wooden crates, talking low. One of them pulled out a rifle, a lever-action Winchester, silver catching the last light. They set up a few tin cans on a fence post. Otto smirked. Now we'll see their circus. A few other prisoners joined him. The first shot cracked the evening silence. A can flew backward into the dust. A second shot, another can, same result. Then one cowboy flipped a playing card into the air and hit it clean before it touched the ground. The Germans stopped laughing. "A lucky," Otto muttered. But when the Texan did it again, then again, faster, no one replied. One guard glanced their way. "Evening, fellas," he called casually, lowering his rifle. "We were just practicing. You boys shoot?" Otto bristled at the tone, friendly, not mocking. "We shoot better than that." The cowboy grinned. "Oh well, maybe tomorrow we'll see." That night, Otto lay on his cot, listening to the wind outside. The camp seemed too quiet, the laughter gone. His thoughts churned. He remembered training recruits back in Bavaria, shouting drills until their hands bled. Precision, control, repetition, that was how a soldier shot straight. But these Americans, they'd done it like it was nothing. No orders, no tension, just the crack of the rifle and the can flying. Morning came hot and clear. The prisoners were assigned to work detail, clearing brush near the outer fence. The Texans oversaw them from horseback, reins loose, rifles slung. Otto noticed how easily they moved, how they used their voices instead of shouting. He caught himself watching one of them twirl a lasso, looping it around a fence post just for sport. When the break whistle blew, Otto wiped sweat from his brow and found the same cowboy, Corporal Joe Carter, leaning against a tree, hat tipped low. The man lifted his rifle again, checking the sights. "Still think we ain't real guards?" he asked, voice mild. Otto hesitated, caught between pride and curiosity. "You shoot well. For a farmer." Carter smiled. "Out here, that's the same thing." He flipped another card into the air. Crack! The halves fluttered to the ground. He didn't even seem to aim. Something in Otto's chest tightened, not fear, not yet, but a flicker of respect he didn't want to name. He turned away before Carter could see it. That evening, the laughter didn't return. The Germans sat in small groups, quieter, eyes drifting toward the guards who moved through the fading light with that same effortless calm. The air smelled of dust and beans and gunpowder. Somewhere, a harmonica played a slow tune, winding through the camp like smoke. Otto stared at the sky, its vastness unlike anything he'd known back home. The war felt far away here, too far. He told himself these men were still fools, but the image of that card splitting in midair kept returning. When he finally closed his eyes, the laughter of the first day echoed faintly in his head, but it didn't sound so sure anymore. The next morning broke with the kind of sharp, golden light that made even barbed wire seem beautiful. The air was cooler, the dust settled, and the faint hum of cicadas filled the silence. Otto Kruger woke early, his body trained to military rhythm even here in captivity. He sat on the edge of his cot, hands clasped, staring at the cracks in the wooden floor. The image of the cowboy splitting that playing card lingered like an itch behind his eyes. Outside, the camp was already alive with quiet movement. Guards walked in pairs, their boots thudding softly on the dirt. A bell rang somewhere near the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted through the barracks, strong, burnt, and tempting. Otto buttoned his shirt and stepped outside. The morning sun hit his face like a slap. Work duty was posted on a chalkboard by the main gate. His name was listed: Forg Fence Repair. He almost laughed. Fence repair. A task for peasants, not soldiers. But there was nothing to do but obey. He joined the small group of POWs being escorted to the outer edge of the camp, where open fields stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Carter was there again, the same calm grin under that weathered hat. "Morning, fellas," he said. His voice carried no authority, yet everyone moved when he spoke. "We got some posts down after the rain last week. Keep your line straight and tight, and it'll go easy." Otto picked up a hammer and a bundle of wire, watching Carter ride along the fence line. The man moved like the horse was part of him, fluid, confident. No need for shouting. No bluster. Just quiet command. It annoyed Otto at first. How could someone so casual command such respect? They worked for hours under the sun. Sweat darkened their uniforms. The dirt baked hard beneath their boots. Carter rode by occasionally, checking progress, nodding approval, offering a word or two. When noon came, he stopped near Otto and handed him a tin canteen. "A water," Carter said simply. Otto hesitated before taking it. "A dankey," he muttered. "Don't mention it." Carter leaned back in the saddle, studying him. "You from the city or the country?" "Munich," Otto replied. "But my family had a small farm outside." "Chickens?" "A few goats." "Nothing much." Carter grinned. Then you know what work is. Otto didn't answer. He watched Carter instead, his hands calloused, his posture easy, his rifle slung behind him like an afterthought. The German's curiosity deepened. This was not the America he had been taught to hate. After lunch, a guard set up a target board against a distant post. The Texans practiced shooting daily, not out of necessity, but habit. Otto paused to watch. Carter fired 6 shots in a row, each hitting close to center. He reloaded with mechanical grace. No wasted motion. Your turn, Kraut, Carter said, handing Otto the Winchester. Otto stiffened, then accepted. He had trained hundreds of men with the Carabiner 98K. His confidence was unshakable. He lined up the sights, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The first shot hit slightly low. The second corrected higher. The third dead center. Carter let out a low whistle. Not bad, he said, taking back the rifle. Guess the stories about German sharpshooters are true. Otto allowed himself a small smirk. We take pride in precision. Carter nodded. So do we. Just comes from a different place. The remark stuck with Otto. A different place. That evening, as he washed up at the water trough, he found himself watching the Cowboys again. They weren't loud. They weren't cruel. They moved like men who didn't need to prove anything. In his army days, strength was displayed through rank and ritual. Here, it came from quiet skill and something deeper he couldn't name. Days passed. The Texans and Germans began to speak more freely. A few words of English mixed with broken German, enough for jokes and small exchanges. The hostility softened into a wary curiosity. The POWs learned to fix fences properly, to handle the rough Texan tools, to read the rhythm of the land. Otto noticed his hands growing rougher again, the calluses familiar and oddly comforting. One afternoon, after the day's work ended, Carter brought out a harmonica and played while the sun sank low. The music drifted across the camp, sweet and tired. A few of the Germans hummed along softly, old melodies from home, blending with the twang of American notes. Otto sat apart, listening. He felt something he hadn't felt in months, calm. Later that night, as the guards patrolled lazily under the moonlight, Otto sat outside the barracks with his friend Ernst. They're not soldiers, Ernst said. Not like us. I know, Otto agreed quietly. But maybe that's why they win. Ernst frowned. What do you mean? Otto stared at the stars, each one sharp against the black sky. We fight with rules. They fight with instincts. Look at them. They don't shout orders, they just know what to do. Ernst said nothing more. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the guards' quarters. It wasn't cruel laughter, just ordinary men sharing stories, maybe about horses or weather or home. Otto realized he missed that kind of laughter. The kind without fear behind it. The next morning brought a strange tension. A new group of POWs had arrived, fresh from the European front, still full of defiance. They saw the cowboy guards and burst out laughing, just as Otto's group once had. These are our captors? One of them jeered. Where are their officers? Their uniforms? Otto watched silently. Something inside him shifted, an unease he couldn't hide. Carter must have sensed it. He approached with that same steady calm and said to the new prisoners, "You'll learn soon enough." Then he walked to the firing range and set up bottles along a wooden rail. The newcomers kept laughing. Carter didn't speak. He just lifted his rifle, sighted, and fired. 6 shots. 6 bottles exploded into glass dust. The laughter stopped. Otto looked at his men, his countrymen, and saw the same shock he'd once worn. He felt a strange pride in the cowboy's silence, in that unspoken confidence. Later, while helping clear the shards, he found himself beside Carter. The Texan reloaded his rifle slowly. "You were right," Otto said under his breath. "About what?" "That strength comes from a different place." Carter glanced at him, eyes narrowing slightly but not unkind. "Took you a while to see it." Otto nodded. Some lessons take more than a bullet. Carter chuckled softly, holstering his rifle. You ain't wrong there. As the sun fell and the camp lights flickered on, Otto lingered by the fence, looking out at the plains that seemed to stretch forever. He'd arrived mocking the men who guarded him. Now, he wasn't sure who the real soldiers were, the ones who fought for orders, or the ones who fought simply to protect what they loved. When the night wind rose, carrying the faint scent of mesquite and rain, Otto thought of his home, of the war, and of the men around him, enemies, yet not. He closed his eyes and, for the first time since capture, didn't dream of escape. Rain came at dawn, heavy and warm, soaking through the earth and flattening the dust that had hung in the air for weeks. The camp looked different under gray skies, muted, softer, almost peaceful. The Germans stood under the eaves of the barracks watching as the Cowboys rode through the mud, checking fence lines and drainage trenches. Even in the downpour, they moved with that same effortless rhythm. Otto Kruger stood with his hands in his pockets, water dripping from his hair, thinking how strange it was that the sound of rain made him feel freer than the sound of marching boots ever had. When the storm broke, the sky opened to a hard, clean blue. The prisoners went back to work, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. Otto worked beside Carter again, the two of them repairing the outer fence that had taken damage from the rain. Carter's hat was soaked, his shirt clung to his back, but he was still grinning. "I bet it don't rain like this in Germany," he said. "Not like this," Otto replied, twisting the wire tighter. "There it's cold, Gray." "This," he paused, looking at the steam rising off the ground. "This feels alive." Carter nodded. "That's Texas for you. Mean 1 minute, gentle the next." They worked quietly for a while. Somewhere nearby, another guard was humming, and the sound of hammering mixed with birdsong. It felt less like a prison and more like a farm after a storm. As the weeks passed, the distance between guards and prisoners began to vanish. The Germans were allowed to help with ranch work beyond the fences, under supervision. Otto volunteered for most of it, anything that got him beyond the wire. He learned to saddle horses, drive a tractor, even herd cattle. At first it was humiliating. Then it wasn't. He'd never realized how much he missed working with his hands, the satisfaction of building something rather than destroying it. The war had stripped that from him, had stripped it from everyone. But here, surrounded by open sky and men who treated him like a man rather than an enemy, something in him began to mend. One evening, Carter found him by the corral, leaning on the fence. The sun was setting low, casting everything in red-gold light. "You know," Carter said, "you're not half bad with that hammer now." Otto smiled faintly. "Don't sound like much of a compliment." "Depends on who you ask," Carter replied. "Doubt here, fixing a fence right means more than knowing how to shoot." Otto glanced at him. "You still think we Germans don't know how to build?" I didn't say that. You folks make fine engines, no doubt. But I figure there's a difference between building something to last and building something to win." The words sank deep. Otto didn't respond, but he understood. His entire life had been about winning, outperforming, outshooting, outlasting. But what good was victory when everything you built turned to ashes? Later that night, the guards and prisoners gathered around a fire near the mess hall. Someone had roasted meat over the flames, and Carter had brought a harmonica again. A few of the Germans played a soft tune on borrowed guitars. The smell of food, smoke, and wood mixed in the air. For the first time, Otto laughed, really laughed. He passed a cup of coffee to Carter. "Strange," he said. "A year ago, I would have called you my enemy." Carter shrugged. "The war makes enemies out of men who might have shared a beer otherwise." The fire cracked. A few men hummed softly. Otto stared into the flames. "You ever lose someone close?" Carter nodded. "Brother at Normandy. Never found him. Guess he's part of the ocean now." Otto lowered his eyes. "My brother died in Russia. Frozen outside Kursk. They said he died a hero, but I don't know what that means anymore." Carter took a sip, then said quietly, "Maybe it means they did what they thought was right, even if the people who told him what was right were wrong. For a long time neither spoke. The night was still, save for the low murmur of voices and the sound of the fire. Months slipped by. The war in Europe ended. Rumors spread fast: Hitler dead, Germany surrendered. One morning Walker called the camp together. His tone was calm but heavy. "Gentlemen," he said, "the war's over. You'll all be going home soon." There was no cheering. Just silence. The Germans stood still, processing the words. Some smiled faintly, others looked lost. Otto felt something twist inside him: relief, yes, but also a strange sadness. He looked across the yard at Carter, who met his gaze and gave a small nod. A week later, the first transport trucks arrived. The prisoners packed their few belongings, said quiet goodbyes. Otto folded his worn shirt carefully, tucking a small token inside, a spent bullet casing Carter had given him, engraved with it Texas 1945. At the gate, Carter stood waiting. The morning sun cut sharp shadows across the ground. "Never figured I'd miss you fellas," he said. Otto smiled faintly. "We never figured we'd respect cowboys." They shook hands, the grip firm, unspoken. Carter leaned in slightly. "Take that home with you," he said, tapping the bullet casing in Otto's pocket. "I'll remind you what steady hands can do." "I won't forget," Otto said. The trucks rumbled to life. As they pulled away, Otto looked back one last time. The camp was smaller than he remembered, the fences thinner, the sky wider. The cowboys stood by the gate, hats raised in a silent farewell. Years passed. Germany rebuilt itself piece by piece, and so did Otto. He never returned to the army. Instead, he opened a small shooting club near Munich, teaching young men not just how to aim, but how to think before they did. On the wall behind his desk hung a single photograph, faded, sun-bleached, showing a group of men standing together in front of a fence in Texas, smiling. One winter afternoon, a young student noticed it. "Who are they, Herr Kruger?" Otto paused before answering. "Men who taught me something the war never could." The boy frowned. What's that?" "That real strength doesn't come from uniforms," Otto said quietly. "It comes from steady hands and a calm heart." The boy nodded, not fully understanding. Otto looked out the window at the falling snow, the fields beyond. For a moment, he could smell the dust of Texas again, hear the crack of a rifle splitting a card, see a man in a hat smiling under the endless sky. He touched the bullet casing on his desk, its brass dulled by time. "Respect," he murmured to himself. "Like aim, it begins when the noise fades." Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and endless, and Otto felt the strange warmth of memory, of a war that had ended, and a lesson that never would.